Coming up on today's Airborne, an Asiana Boeing 777 goes down at SFO. EAA seeks legal redress against the FAA. And controversial new fees make flying to the Bahamas even more expensive. Welcome to Airborne on Aero-TV. I'm Ashley Hale. The investigation into the cause of the crash of an Asiana Airlines Boeing 777 at San Francisco Saturday began almost before the flames were extinguished. The FAA and the NTSB are both participating. The NTSB Chairman Deborah Hersman said on Sunday that there was no indication of a criminal act, but it was too early to determine what went wrong. Asiana said mechanical failure did not appear to be a factor. Two 16-year-old Chinese girls, described as students, were killed, and 180 others were injured. The plane was coming in from Seoul when witnesses said its tail appeared to hit the approach area of a runway that juts into San Francisco Bay. NTSB reports that the flight crew tried to initiate a go-around 1.5 seconds before impact after the stick shaker activated. The impact knocked off the plane's tail, and the aircraft appeared to bounce violently, scattering a trail of debris before coming to rest off the tarmac. The two young women were seated in the rear of the plane. The crash was the first fatal accident involving the Boeing 777, a popular long-range jet that has been in service since 1995. It was the first fatal commercial airline accident in the U.S. since a regional plane operated by Colgan Air crashed in New York in 2009. The EAA has decided to fight back against the FAA and its last-minute demand for AirVenture expenses with less than a month before the opening of the largest aviation gathering in the world. EAA has confirmed to ANN that they have filed a petition with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Court in Chicago, asking the court to review and provide relief from payments demanded by the FAA in relation to air traffic control services at EAA AirVenture Oshkosh. In its petition, the EAA asked the court to stop the FAA from augmenting its congressionally approved appropriation through unilaterally imposed fees on aviation events such as AirVenture. The EAA maintains the fees were imposed without standard notice and comment procedure from the FAA, making it procedurally improper and unlawful. Those fees eventually totaled $447,000. Other aviation events throughout the nation were also assessed fees without warning or the standard notice and comment procedure. As part of the petition, EAA is asking the court to reverse the FAA's decision to seek these payments, as well as return the fees already paid and other costs incurred. ANN filed an in-depth analysis of the issues involved in Monday's edition of Aero-News at www.aero-news.net. In a move questioned by many in the GA world, the government of the Bahamas began charging new airport taxes July 1st, and that means it's suddenly more expensive to fly in the islands. Tom Patton reports.
The new tax for private aircraft arriving in the Bahamas is $50, and it applies to en route fuel stops. According to information provided by Caribbean Flying Adventures, pilots of private aircraft will be charged a $50 fee for a, quote, cruising permit for private aircraft entering the Bahamas, end quote, even if that aircraft is simply stopping for fuel and continuing on to a non-Bahamian destination. That boosts the cost for technical fuel stops for safety by $50. In addition, the government has imposed a passenger departure tax of $25, which also applies to the crew, making the Bahamas the only island nation that applies departure taxes to crew members. The new regulation states that the $25 fee also applies to children below the age of 6. That means a day trip to Bimini with 3 passengers in a Cessna 172 costs $150 just to get there and to leave before the first tourism dollar is spent. A $10 customs fee for importing fuel has been replaced by a 1% charge on the value of the fuel, plus the cost of ocean freight and imputed freight insurance, so the cost of fuel in the Bahamas will also be going up. Jim Parker of Caribbean Flying Adventures says that he has written the Minister of Transport and Aviation to ask that she raise the issue at the most senior levels of government. Meanwhile, he says new taxes levied on boaters have been suspended. Stay tuned. For Airborne, I'm Tom Patton.
The first production Cessna TTX airplanes were delivered last week following a ceremony at the Cessna facility in Independence, Kansas. According to Cessna, the TTX holds the distinction of being the world's fastest commercially produced and certified fixed-gear single-engine aircraft. Production line flow of the TTX was announced in April of 2012. The Garmin G2000 equipped aircraft has a top speed of 235 knots, an operating ceiling of 25,000 feet, and an optional flight into known icing system, enabling pilots to file flight plans allowing for varying weather conditions. A high-performance all-composite aircraft, Cessna says it designed the TTX for advanced pilots with advanced technology and greater comfort in mind. ForeFlight version 5.2, the latest update which has just hit the App Store, offers a variety of new features, including Nav Canada visual navigation charts and visual terminal area charts. Through a partnership with Nav Canada, the new Canada VNC map layer shows the entire mosaic of VNCs, with VTAs automatically appearing as you zoom in to bigger metropolitan areas. The company said in a recent blog post that these charts can be downloaded to your iPad or iPhone for offline use. The complete set of VNC, VTA, IFR, en route charts, and Canadian Air Pilot are included with the ForeFlight Canada subscription for $149.99 US per year. Pilots who already have an existing ForeFlight Canada subscription can immediately start downloading VNC charts upon upgrading to ForeFlight Mobile 5.2. The new data is included in the existing Canada plan. Version 5.2 also brings additional chart coverage to U.S. pilots, FAA helicopter, Gulf of Mexico VFR, and Gulf of Mexico IFR charts. ForeFlight 5.2 also has a new FBO view that has been redesigned to present more detailed information about facilities and amenities at local airports. You're watching Airborne, more in a moment.
Since the early days of powered flight, pilots have struggled with landing in crosswinds and learning proper crosswind landing techniques. Even today, most crosswind landing skills are learned through trial and error, sometimes with disastrous results. Believe it or not, the most common contributing factor in weather-related accidents each year is crosswinds. The second most common factor is wind gusts. In fact, crosswinds and wind gusts cause more landing accidents than fog, thunderstorms, and icing combined. That's where the Redbird X-Wind SE comes in. It teaches pilots the proper techniques to meet and beat these top two causes of weather-related landing accidents. By placing pilots in gusty crosswind conditions for extended periods of time, the X-Wind SE gives instructors all the time they need to teach the pilot the proper techniques for landing in challenging crosswind conditions. For more information on Redbird flight simulations, the Redbird X-Wind SE, and Redbird's entire line of flight training devices, visit www.redbirdflightsimulations.com.
Welcome back. If you'd like to suggest a story for Airborne, Aero-TV, our website, or a podcast, drop us an email to news-spy@aero-news.net. The Russian space program has suffered yet another setback with the loss of a Proton M booster carrying satellites into orbit. Video shows the booster leaving the launch pad, but veering off course within seconds of clearing the towers. It veered out of control, started breaking up, caught fire, and impacted the ground near the launch facility that Russia leases in Kazakhstan. The rocket's payload included 3 satellites that would have joined the GLONASS satellite navigation system constellation. The Proton rocket was designed by the Soviet Union in the 1960s as an ICBM capable of delivering nuclear weapons to the U.S. This past week saw the recreation of an historic first flight. In 1913, just 10 years after the Wright brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, 21-year-old Logan A. Jack Vilas was the first person to fly an airplane across Lake Michigan. The flight took place on July 1st, and it was the first time most people in Chicago had ever seen a seaplane. Velas was only the 6th person in the U.S. to obtain a seaplane rating. The flight took an hour and 40 minutes, according to a report appearing in the South Bend Tribune. And on the 100th anniversary of the flight, it was recreated by the Velas' granddaughter, 61-year-old Faith Velas. Velas reportedly received a hero's welcome in Chicago after his 54-mile crossing from Silver Beach in St. Joseph, Minnesota. Faith made the trip in just 45 minutes, about half the time it took her grandfather. She and Derek DeRuiter, who own Northwoods Aviation in Cadillac, Minnesota, flew an amphibious Cessna 185 belonging to Northwoods Aviation in clear weather across the lake. But it was not all clear, smooth sailing. The Windy City lived up to its name, and there was some choppy water in the landing area when the two arrived in Chicago. Faith Velas said they had to make 3 approaches before making the water landing. Her option, she said, was to punt and land at the airport. The owner of the skydiving company that owns the plane that was involved in a near collision incident with a Spirit Airlines A319 over Michigan last Wednesday, said that his pilot did nothing wrong and is not responsible for the incident. Franz Gerschweiler operates Skydive Tecumseh. He told the Associated Press that the FAA took great pains to tell him that his pilot is not under investigation. But FAA spokeswoman Elizabeth Corey said that the operation of both aircraft remains under review, along with the action of air traffic controllers and their equipment. The pilot of the A319 initiated a steep 2,000-foot dive after receiving a collision warning causing some minor injuries to flight attendants in the main cabin. A Spirit spokeswoman said that the pilot flying the Spirit jet followed appropriate procedures. If all goes according to plan, the Orion spacecraft will conduct an unmanned test flight in 2014. Consequently, the pace of assembling the spacecraft has stepped up at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Workers there are reportedly working on the hundreds of systems and key components that will be a part of the spacecraft. Technicians are already practicing stacking a mock-up of the launch abort system on the top of the spacecraft inside the Mammoth Vehicle Assembly Building on the Florida coast. Practicing with the high-fidelity analogs of the actual spacecraft components will help workers stay proficient with the process as they prepare for the launch next year and future manned missions. The equipment being used is the same gear employed for the last 3 decades of the shuttle program. And now it's time for our Aero video of the week. For an RC pilot who flies helicopter aerobatics, what could be more satisfying than a flight in the real thing? Hang on to your hats and stomachs in this week's AVW, featuring the Aerobatic Red Bull BL105 CB130X BNF. To view the entire ride, search YouTube for Red Bull BL105 CB130X BNF by Blade. If the airlines want to trim their cost, the solution, according to Go Air, is simple. Hire slim, trim female flight attendants. In a statement sure to be seen as sexist in some circles, Indian airline Go Air says that they are hiring slim women as flight attendants simply because they weigh less, which translates into substantial fuel savings for the airline. Go Air says that its flight attendant ratio of 60-40 women to men was still the most male-heavy in the Indian airline industry, but that they will be hiring more women in the future because they on average weigh 33 to 44 pounds less than men. Increasing the number of women employed as cabin crew to 70%, which Go Air says is the industry average, will save the airline nearly $500,000 annually in fuel cost. CNN reports that the airline denies that it is establishing gender-based hiring policies. But the airline says it plans to hire some 2,000 flight attendants in the next 7 years. So get those resumes ready, girls. Well, remember, you can get comprehensive, real-time, 24/7 coverage of the latest aviation and aerospace stories at aero-news.net. And please remember, Airborne is streamed twice weekly and is always online. Please join us again this Friday for another edition of Airborne. I'm Ashley Hale. Thanks for watching.